Welcome back to the Pagan World Conference. This is Reverend Dia, and she's going to be talking to us about the many issues of disability and what to do about it. There we go. And further ado, Lady Dia, Reverend Dia.
Reverend Dia, thank you. Um, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we're all standing on land from Indigenous people here in the Atlanta area, which is where I'm from. It's the Zalagi, which is another word for Cherokee, and the Muskogee Creek Indians. This next slide is in that the background is my first service animal, Alice, who passed away during COVID. And then you can see all of my affiliations. The only thing that's not on there is that I also am the hostess of Urban Unwitches, which is a podcast that you're welcome to follow along on. You can just look that up, Urban Unwitches, and find us on your favorite podcasting platform. So the first question that I always get is what defines disability? And if we look at just a regular definition, it's a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities. I have founded Pagans with Disability and Chronic Illnesses, and we have come up with a definition as a group that's a little different. And what we say is that disability is any physical or mental condition, sometimes resulting from accident or injury or illness, that interacts with societal barriers. And my favorite part of this definition is this: disability is an inability to perform some or all tasks considered common everyday activities without changes to those tasks or the environment. So if we consider ourselves disabled, or if we are disabled, it is because we can't do normal things: walking at a pagan event, dancing around a fire circle. Those kinds of things are limited to us because of mobility issues or even chronic illness. And chronic illness is one of the other focuses of Pagans with Disability and Chronic Illness. And it's basically defined in the same way. The only difference is that the underlying condition is often medical condition. So those medical conditions are what's generating the disability in that case. So I love this particular graphic. I've used this before because it is a terrible graphic. It says, what does disability look like? And then it shows a bunch of disabled people who have what are physical attributed disabilities, including old age. The problem with that is that lots of people have a disability that you can't readily see and readily understand. And we call those invisible disabilities. So not all disabilities are visible. Some are immediately apparent. I have a POTS type disorder, and I do a lot of things, a lot of mechanisms we're going to talk about that keep me from passing out in public because it's kind of embarrassing, quite frankly, and I don't like the fuss. So most people don't see it. Does that mean that I don't pass out ever? No, it doesn't. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not happening and that it's not real. One of the ways that I describe being disabled is through tokens. And this is something that I came up with for my son, my young son, who is 27 now. But when he was younger, mom went from very healthy to very quickly not healthy. And I had to explain to him that what happens for people like me is we all go to the arcade and everybody else is given 100 tokens and someone like myself is given 50. The only problem is it costs a token to do everything: brush your teeth. It costs a token to get dressed. It costs tokens to be in a shower. It takes tokens to eat. It takes tokens to get ready to eat, to prepare a meal. All of those I'm spending tokens. So I'm still spending the same amount of tokens, but I'm starting with less tokens to begin with. And what that impact is that not all of the things that I want to do are going to get done in any given day because I'm going to run out of tokens. So that was just a way that I tried to explain to my younger son what it's like to be disabled, and how that impacts my ability to interact with him and go out and run around and hike and do all the things that I used to do before I was disabled. One of the other common things that you should know about people who are disabled is masking and coping. Masking is the common term used to describe you pretending that you're well in order to better fit into the environment. Trust me when I say people who are disabled don't want anybody to know. They want to be independent. They want to have all of those things that everybody else has an ability to do. And so one of the ways that we fit in is masking. Now, why is this important? Because many people will come across someone who's disabled, who doesn't look disabled, as I don't, and then decide whether or not I'm disabled based on my presentation. And what I'm trying to explain here is that my presentation is moderated and mediated by my pretending to be well, even though I'm not. Um, I I took the following techniques that I'm about to show you from just my family and friends who were sick, and I called them up and I said, "Tell me your top masking techniques." And one is to not do what I call high token activities. So if today I was teaching and I knew I was going to teach, so I didn't do a lot this morning, saving up my tokens so that I could be here and do this presentation and be energetic and be available and aware. The other is grin and bear it. Just pretend that it doesn't exist. You can be in pain. I'm in a pain level today of about 6 or 7, and just ignore it. It doesn't exist. And that is one of the ways that we mask so that people don't know. We also do a lot of mental pain management. They have found that people with chronic pain have a different pain threshold and level than people who are not in chronic pain. And so we're actually putting up with what they consider a higher level of pain management than other people are. We also stay hyper focused and very always in motion. The adage is, if you're disabled and you stop, you may not get up, so you can't stop. You have to keep going. And I especially do this when I'm at gatherings or at pagan conventions. Then you'll see us eating the high sugar foods and sodas and lots of caffeine to try to offset the effects of our disability. We also joke and laugh about ourselves a lot, diminishing the severity of our illness. I have a friend who has Ehlers-Danlos right now, and she is just doing all of these things. And she will, make jokes about the MRI machine being down again, and how they can't do the MRI on her hip that they need. And it's becomes a big joke, haha. But the problem is that most of us have disabilities that are no joking matter. We also will downplay our illnesses to people who are able-bodied. So we'll say, "Hey, it's no big deal." And this happens a lot when I pass out in public. I pass out in public, and I'm immediately when I come to, I'm like, "Nope, don't call anybody. It's fine. Don't worry about it." Like, I know I just passed out in front of you, but it's okay. And a lot of that is trying to make able-bodied people feel better, but a lot of that is also trying to inform people what not to do, like call 911. It's not necessary. They're just going to come and tell me things I already know. And then the other thing is that a lot of people with chronic illness, especially Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, have often look very, very young for their age. And so they don't come across as disabled. And that's a part of how they mask from that. Outside of masking, there's also ways of coping. And these are some of the ways that people who are disabled will go about coping. And one is preparing. And this is where a lot of pagans and pagan organizations can be part of the acceptance of people with disabilities. You go in and you call them and say, "I have this disability. I'm bringing my service animal. Is that a problem? Is there other animals that are not service animals that are going to be there?" Try to find out as much as I can before I attend. and make sure that I'm going to be in a good place with the support of my service animal that I need. Another one is technology. You can't see it today, but I wear a band that tells me my heart rate. It tells me how much energy I've spent in any given day. It monitors a lot of things with me. And technology has become a very big part of how people with chronic illnesses adapt and overcome those chronic illnesses. Sticking to a very strict schedule. I go to bed at the same time every day. I get up at the same time every day. I take medicine on a very strict schedule. It is imperative that you keep your body in this very rigid, no matter where you're at, right? I actually live action role play, and I keep my watch on me so that it will tell me when to take my medication. So it's not unusual for me and LARP to go, we're in the middle of a battle. Okay, I have to go take my medication. Like we have to stop. So that's how strict I am about the schedule that I keep myself on me. And then we also carry a lot of equipment. I carry a blood pressure cuff. I carry a pulse oximeter. I carry emergency medications. I carry my, if I'm out at a pagan event, I actually carry a list of my medications and my diagnoses and my doctors with me. Usually it's in the pocket of my service animal. So that's one of some of the ways that I get by coping. And if you've never heard of body doubling, this is something that you can do for any person who is disabled or chronically ill. Call them up and say, I'm going to wash my dishes. Why don't you fold your laundry? And we'll talk on the phone while we do this. And it helps to kind of mask over the difficulties that you might have to do some of these everyday tasks. I often call my best friend and she's folding laundry while I'm doing dishes, or I'm folding laundry while she's doing some other housework, and we just keep each other in the ear. And it's a way to get things done, and it's called body doubling. And then stimming, most people are familiar with this for people who are neurodivergent. Stimming is when you have a tick or you do the same things over and over again. I if you watch my podcast, you'll see me clicking pens. Like I really try not to, but it happens. And that's a form of stimming. And it's what that does is it's a self-soothing mechanism. It makes you feel calmer and it makes you feel more in control. And that's why you'll see a lot of people with chronic illness and disabilities do that type of thing. We also have to relearn to do what our illness has taken from us. So one of the things is we try to find ways around what we can no longer do. So having a stool in the shower is a big deal. And if you have a pagan event, you need to make sure that there is one stall that has a stool of some sort so that people can have that so that they can shower. These are real issues that people are facing, and we're all learning to do them differently. I still fold the laundry, but I no longer carry the basket up and down the stairs. My husband does that for me. And then, of course, taking medication is another way that we cope. So what can Pagans groups do now that we understand what disability is? And the first thing I would like to talk about here is person language, emphasizing the person before the disability. So a person who is blind, a person who is disabled, a person who is chronically ill, putting the person before the illness or chronic illness. And then the other way to say that is identity first. And I might say that like, I am, I have neurocardiogenic syncope and my name is Dia. I'm putting the fact that I'm disabled first. Both of these ways of talking to someone about disability are very acceptable. You just need to find out how that person wants to do that. The third way that people talk about disabilities is usually by doctors, and it's a medical first. So they might describe what neurocardiogenic syncope is, and then maybe talk about the person that has it. But they're focused on the different ways of manifesting these illnesses and disabilities. So the other thing I want you to think about is if you are in a pagan group and you have someone who you know is disabled there and they don't look good, and you go up to them and you say, how are they? The answer you're going to get is fine. But fine means feelings internalized but not expressed. Feelings internalized but not expressed. Fine, Fine. Remember that, because we as the disabled and the chronically ill have learned to tell everybody we're fine even when we're not. And my husband has learned to say, I heard you just say that you were fine. I'm concerned because you're flushed and it looks like your pulse rate's real high right now. That is a better approach for my husband than just allowing me to say I'm fine. When you're in a more a public setting, you want to find ways to inquire. And one of the ways you can do that is by saying, can I get you a chair? Would you like some water? We have some snacks. Would you like a snack right now? All of those say, I want to care for you, without saying, oh, by the way, you're disabled, right? Um, one of the big things about empowerment needs to start the attitude. And I actually just put up a post about this on Pagans with Disabilities and Chronic Illnesses.org, where I talk about the idea that pagans often view health as being every part of your body is hale and hearty. You don't have any signs or symptoms. That is the epitome of what total health is, right? And I like to say we need to be worried about optimum health. And so instead of healing to fix somebody, we need to heal to bring them to the optimum level of their health and what they can achieve with their body. So we might instead say, let's raise energy to lower the inflammation levels in someone's body. Let's raise energy to help lower the blood pressure or lower the heart rate. Doing things specifically designed to help heal versus making the person who is sick feel like there's something wrong with them because they're never going to achieve total health and healing. Um, I talk a lot about being at Parliament of the World's Religion and having a healer come to me and say, hey, I wish we could just get everyone to understand they can think themselves well. And I said, what about someone whose DNA is born different? Someone with multiple sclerosis or MS or other chronic illnesses that you're born with. Are we suggesting that those people have the ability to think their DNA into a state it was never in to begin with? These are some of the things you should think about when you're talking about healing in a pagan context, and you want to be sensitive to the fact that there are people who are disabled and chronically ill. I just get this, to me, this is the number one things that we as pagan can do to be more receptive to the disabled and the chronically ill. And that number one thing is think differently. Don't tell your friends when they're sick, get over it. You're fine. Just get up and do it. Because that may not be true and it may not be possible. So for me, you have to stop looking at the disabled as inherently spiritually broken, which has improved over the years, but I still run into this. People were like, well, I have a disability too, and I'm doing all this stuff, so you can too. You don't need any accommodation because I can do it. That's a really ableist attitude, and that's one that we want to shy away from if we want to be inclusive to the disabled and to the chronically ill. And also being cognizant of the fact that those with disabilities experience the world very differently. And that goes for every individual who's disabled. So one person who has Ehlers-Danlos may not be bound to a wheelchair and someone else might be, and they still have the same condition, but they also have very different needs and very different accommodation requests of an organization or of an event. And so you need to remember that. You need to meet each person who is disabled where they're at versus trying to make blanket judgments about people who are disabled, right? Sorry, I'm reading my notes here. And I've talked about all of this. Oh, I was going to say one of the things that I wanted to address was that it is normal for you to meet someone who says, I'm disabled, and then have this thought that they are faking it or they're not that disabled, or if they would, my favorite is if you would just lose weight, then you wouldn't be disabled. These are normal things in our society to think because we live in an ableist society, a society that says that you can make yourself well if you eat well, if you're healthy, if you walk, if you fill in the blank, are a vegetarian, or or a pescatarian, whatever it is, fill that in. We live in a society that pushes that as an agenda. It says it's these people who say they're sick, they're not. In the United States, there are it's guesstimated 15 to 20% of adults are disabled. Only 3% of those people are on Social Security. So it tells you that there are a lot of people struggling with disability and overcoming that on a daily basis. And even I meet people and think, oh, are they really disabled? And I have to say to myself, Dia, that is not okay, right? You have to take people where they're at and what they tell you, and you have to believe that, and you have to have accommodations for that. But I do think it's important to understand that that kind of thinking is a product of the society that we live in. And you just need to be cognizant of it. It's if you have that thought, better to address that thought in your head and back that off in your head and correct your thinking versus taking that out on the person and not believing them, or, kind of being down on them because they want an accommodation. And then also part of safety and empowerment is the practical of events. Does your event offer ramps if necessary? Does your event offer different types of food availability? I have a friend who's deathly allergic to cinnamon. And so are your cakes in Cakes and Ale, do they have cinnamon in it? It's very common. Those things. Do you have vegan options? Do you have all these different things? And just thinking ahead about those things can really make someone who's disabled feel more welcome in the space. And the other thing is this kind of medium is a really great way to reach people who are disabled and who are chronically ill. So having an outreach where you're utilizing Zoom or any other Discord, using that to create space, sacred space, and teaching space is a really good alternative when it comes to making space and room for the disabled and the chronically ill. The other thing you need to do is you need to remember that chronic illness is something that someone deals with every day, and it's their long-term disability. So if you think, hey, this person might need a ride today to go to the doctor, then in all likelihood, in 6 months from now, they're still going to need a ride to the doctor. It's not going to, this isn't a one-time thing. You can't commit to the disabled and then do it when it pleases you. It really has to be on the timeline of the person who's sick. One of the services that you can offer as a pagan group, and I recommend this, is to become, I call it a illness doula or an advocate, someone who helps a person who's disabled navigate doctor's appointments, navigate um, all of the medication restrictions and diet restrictions, and bring in social workers if needed, bring in, the system that the state or the federal government might offer to help this person. Being someone who helps walk through that with another person is really, really a gem of a thing to do, because it helps that person not feel isolated, and it also helps in the outcome. When people have advocates, we know they get better care, period, full stop. If you have an advocate, you're going to get better care. And so being that advocate for someone could really improve their life all the way around. Offering a cleaning service or laundry support to someone who's disabled or chronically ill is a really good opportunity in the pagan world to reach those who are disabled and chronically ill. And then expanding food offerings. If you have a group that does, feeds the elderly in our community, think about adding one person who's chronically ill, even if they have a job, because these people are putting all their energy into the job and then often coming home and crashing and can't really have the energy to do a good meal and have a hot meal. So just consider that as something else you can do. Also, as a pagan, you can support any type of public transportation. The disabled are disproportionately affected by poverty. So when we support public transportation, we're supporting the ability of people who are impoverished to get around, get to doctor's appointments, even get to events. So public transportation is really critical to getting further care and making sure people who need care get care. So anytime you can offer a ride to somebody who's sick or needs to go to a doctor, or even if you can just support public transportation in your local government, that would really help people with disability and chronic illnesses. Another change that can be made is to the judicial system. I'm sure we're all aware that the judicial system is more focused on punishment than recovery, and people who have, medical mental illness often turn to drug and alcohol, and they often end up in addiction. And we don't need a punitive system for that. We need a system that helps overcome that addiction and helps them address those mental health issues so that they wouldn't have to turn to drugs in the first place. So just being aware of that, and again, an advocate in your local community really goes a long way to helping those in your immediate community in the pagan community. The other thing is medical care and making medical care affordable and accessible. A lot of people I know who are pagan, who are also chronically ill and disabled, have a terrible time getting in to see a doctor because they literally can't afford it. One of the things that can be done is thinking about maybe setting up a small fund that you help people get to the doctor by paying for that doctor's visit. That's part of being that advocate. And it's one of the programs that might help people who are in paganism, chronically ill and disabled, to get those things addressed. Always support your organizations who support the disabled and advocate for the disabled. Here's the hard one. The Americans with Disabilities Act does not require churches to adhere to any standard of accessibility that is required by the ADA. This doesn't let you off the hook, right? You just because you don't have to do something doesn't mean that it is morally or ethically correct to not do it. It just means that there's not a federal arm that's going to come after you for that. It doesn't mean that you're going to look pretty bad if you haven't tried to think about accessibility in your event, or think about accessibility for your circle, or think about trying to reach out to the disabled in a virtual platform. So I wanted to point this out. I think a lot of people understand that. And I do understand that it's hard for churches. One of, most covens like mine meet in my house. And we didn't have a really good house that didn't have stairwells. We have one stairwell no matter what to get into my house. So when we built our circle on the property, we built the circle with a ramp, a graded ramp, the right grade for the ADA. And that allows people with wheelchairs to come in to our sacred space and be accessible. It was something that we could do after we bought this house and realized that we had made accessibility an issue. And what we do is when we do have someone who's wheelchair bound, we all migrate and do everything in our circle instead of doing it in the house or on the porch where stairs are required to get to it. These are some of the things that you can think about. You may have a house that's not really fit for accessibility purposes, but that doesn't mean you can't think about ways to make that better and ways to better accommodate those who have disability. The other place that you're going to run into people with disability and chronic illness and really need to address that has to do with ritual space. And there are simple things that can be done. Our ritual space has benches built into it so that people can come and sit, and they don't need to ask for a chair. They don't need to ask for an accommodation. They can come in, and if they need to sit, they can sit on the side of our circle that has those seats available. We also are very careful about movement. I read a very great story from someone recently that was talking about being at a ritual and dancing with their hands because they can't dance with their whole body. So that's an alternative. And if you build that into the ritual, hey, we're going to do hand movement versus a whole body movement, then you've reached someone who has that critical illness and can't move like that. I also always have a lot of percussion instruments. And the reason those are so great is because you can get them involved in the drumming and energy raising without having to single them out because they can't dance, they can't stand for very long, whatever it is. And I've found that percussion instruments really bridge that gap and pull people in, even if they can't dance around the fire or do ritual movement. And then the last one is Zoom rituals. We're a very small coven, but we still do Zoom rituals. So we'll do all of our full moons are Zoom adjacent, meaning that there's people live coming together, and then there's usually a laptop set up and you can see who's joining us virtually. And we found that this helps not only people who are disabled, but people who have a long distance to travel and wouldn't be able to get there. I'm also part of Circle Sanctuary's full moon circles, and those are done broadcast live and later on YouTube every full moon. And it provides a ritual with music and education and information and poetry and song and all of those things for people to do that virtually versus having to be in person. And we know from the feedback we've gotten that we're reaching people who are disabled. Originally, the Full Moon Circles started during COVID, and it's just never gone away because the demand for it was so high. So we usually have around 70 to 90 participants when we're doing it live, and that doesn't account for the people who come after. So this is a great way to be in an outreach and have that outreach and be able to pick up those people who may have struggled to be in person. There's also things that you can do when it comes to events. And the number one thing I can recommend is that you find event spaces that already are ADA compliant. I'm going to call out Mystic South for a minute. They definitely did that. They found a space on one level where everything was really quickly within walking distance. It wasn't very far to any one thing from the main area. And their bathrooms were accessible, everything was accessible. And that's a really good example of a group going, okay, how can we make this more accessible? Originally, Mystic South was supposed to be on 2 levels, which would mean traversing stairs and or waiting for an elevator ride. Well, they put everything back on 1 level so that no one had to go through that. So thinking about accessibility in terms of that is a good thing to do. The other thing that's good to do is to look at the space that is provided and then decide if that's going to be a good thing. So if you're going to have a drum circle and you're in a very small room where getting in with a wheelchair is going to be a problem, maybe you put it in a different room, and allow more interaction for those who allow less sorry allow less to overcome if you're in a chair or if you're working with a walker or whatever. You want to make sure that that room that you picked to have that event is as accessible as everything else, the entire rest of the space. Also think about when you go to look at a space, you want to consider whether or not the bathrooms are as accessible as every place else. So this is often a big problem with outdoor spaces. The bathrooms are usually a step up or a step down, and that prohibits people with wheelchairs from getting in and out. It also prohibits people who are walking with a walker or who have limited mobility in general. So thinking ahead a little bit and thinking, does this space have that available? Is it easy to get into the restrooms? Is it easy to get out? Is it easy to take a shower if that's going to be necessary? Thinking about those things in advance can save you having to try to backtrack and problem solve later because you didn't think about them before the event came around. And then thinking about any access barriers, and that includes, you know, reaching out to our ASL brothers and sisters and having ASL interpreters at large events is another thing that really needs to be happening. We have brothers and sisters who need ASL as a language, and we're not offering that as a pagan people. And most people don't even think about doing that. It's not even on their radar, to see if they often you can find someone within your own ranks who is already an ASL interpreter and can help with that. So that's one of the things that I want you to think about as well. The other thing when you're talking about having an event is you want to think about how spread out the venue is. And this is one thing I praise Mystic South for, because it was not it was under a football field to get from the furthest point to the furthest point, and everything was kind of really in close together. And there was, whether there was an intention there or not, it really helped those of us who were disabled and were at that event, because we didn't have to walk all over God's green creation to get where we wanted to go. And that, just thinking about that kind of thing, how spread out is everything? Is the drum circle down a hill? Is the drum circle up a hill? Is the drum circle wheelchair accessible in general? Those things need to be considered as well. Offering mobility alternatives like a golf cart, bus, or an off-road mobility device is a good way to be inclusive as well. A lot of groups do this that have big events where everything is spread out. They'll run one of those golf buses and pick up anybody and help cut down the amount of walking that's done. This is one of the things that would be very helpful. But it also goes back to thinking about how spread out your event's going to be and how much walking is going to be required, and whether or not that's prohibitive to people who are chronically ill or disabled. My number one recommendation for events who are pagan events and they want to reach the disabled and the chronically ill is to put someone on your board who is chronically ill or disabled and have them be there to give you that information and that insight before you open your gates. and before big decisions are made. This way, you've included them in the conversation from the get-go, and it's not an afterthought. It's something that's present on everyone's mind as you move forward. I think this is the number one thing that I would recommend groups do, is to put someone on that board who understands what the challenges are and can help direct the group to be more friendly and open and available to those who are chronically ill and disabled. And that comes with just being proactive. I did not, I have to tell you, I missed a slide. I wanted to give you some stats, and I'm going to go back here real quick. I'm going to give you some stats on the disabled. The World Health Organization lists persons with disabilities as the largest minority. 1 billion people worldwide are denied assistive technology, everything from wheelchairs and crutches. And this number is expected to be 3.5 billion by 2050. As I said before, 20% of Americans live with a disability and less than 3% are on Social Security. 35% of working age people in the United States have disabilities and are employed full time. 16% of people worldwide live with a disability of some kind. And I actually did the research because I thought war had to have a lot to do with the worldwide level of disability. And it turns out it doesn't. That just means that there are that many people disabled, and war has a very finite impact on disability and worldwide. 54 million Americans have a disability of some kind. And according to the data in 2021, around 25% of the people with disabilities are living in poverty, while just 12% of the people without disabilities are living in poverty. So clearly, those with disabilities are having a harder time getting where they need to go, hence the public transportation, getting seen at a doctor, hence the need for affordable health care. These statistics present the poverty rate among people with and without disabilities in the US from 2008 to 2021. And this particular statistic was shopped on April 17th, 2023, before I went to Parliament of the World's Religion. All of that to say that disability is very present. And I was talking to Ed before we came on about the only thing that separates you from disability is age. And the idea is that eventually age is going to catch up with you, and you're going to have a harder time walking. You're going to have a harder time picking things up. You're going to have a harder time driving. It is a matter of time. And as the pagan population ages, these issues need to be on the forefront of the minds of people who host these events and who create events. And we need to be thinking of kind of ahead to the time when, the question is, how do I want to be treated in my old age? And maybe that's how I need to be treating pagan people today. I really appreciate y'all listening to me talk and listening to me talk. I wanted to leave you with an awe. This is Castiel. He is my current service dog. It's still on the day of his graduation from service animal school. You can see his little hat. I appreciate you listening and being a great audience. And I hope that you will consider some of these issues as you move forward, planning events and planning other things to happen. I really appreciate your time. And I hope if you have any questions, you'll reach out to me. I'm craftydia@gmail.com. And I'm also at revdia.net. You can reach me those ways. I'm also on the interwebs as Crafty Dia in general. So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, all of those places as Crafty Dia. So you can reach out to me any of those ways as well. And I appreciate all of your time and effort. And I appreciate the Carillion tradition for putting this on and for bringing pagans together in this manner. Thanks so much, Ed.
Thank you for being here. Yep. And I really appreciate it. And everybody can be able to find this on the Pagan World Congress page, which was afterward. And this is going to be guiding light. So if you've enjoyed this, please share it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.